All right, let's turn our attention now to West Asia. This week, the United States and the United Kingdom once again struck Houthi targets in Yemen. 8 targets were hit. The US says the strikes hit underground weapon storage sites of the Houthis. Bombs were also dropped on the Houthis' missile and surveillance capabilities. All in all, missile systems, launchers, air defense systems, radar, storage facilities were all apparently hit. This happened late on Monday night. On Tuesday morning, the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak told Parliament, and I'm quoting here, "Our initial evidence from last night's strikes is that all intended targets were destroyed," unquote. The British and the American forces also had help from Australia, from Bahrain, Canada, and the Netherlands. But in a statement put out by the US Central Command, the US allies made it clear that the strikes are, quote, "separate and distinct from the multinational freedom of navigation actions performed under Operation Prosperity Guardian." So some more details on those attacks. British jets used precision-guided bombs. They struck multiple location targets near Sana'a. The British Ministry of Defense released this footage. It shows fighter jets taking off from an airfield. We're being told this is Akriti in Cyprus. These jets went on to bomb Houthi targets in Yemen. Just to quickly remind all of you, who are the Houthis? Well, they're a militant group and they control the most populous parts of Yemen. Ever since the war in Gaza began, the Houthis have begun attacking ships in the Red Sea in solidarity with Hamas. They have, of course, already declared war on Israel. The US is trying to weaken the Houthis with these military strikes, only to get in exchange a promise of revenge from that battle-hardened group.
These strikes do not scare us and will not turn a hair on our heads. We are steadfast and support Palestine from within our hearts.
The US airstrikes are like a spray of water for a thirsty person. I swear it will not scare us or turn a hair on our heads. They will see nothing from us but a burning fire and flames, angry and hateful hearts.
And those airstrikes are continuing. On Wednesday morning, the Americans struck targets in Yemen once again. The strikes began around 2:30 a.m. local time. This time we were told that missile stocks were hit. The American bombings were not limited to the Houthis or Yemen, by the way. On Wednesday, America also struck targets in Iraq. It said it was targeting sites being used by Iran-backed armed groups in Iraq. Jurf al-Shakr in the south of the capital, Baghdad, was hit, as was the area of Al-Qaim on the border with Syria. Now, how is Iraq reacting to all of this? Well, the country's National Security Advisor, Qasim al-Araji, said that the strikes did not help bring calm. So should you expect militant groups to strike back? I don't see why not. Quite frankly, it's a volatile situation in West Asia as Israel continues its war in Gaza. It's not clear what the solution possibly can be. Earlier this week, the Financial Times reported that the US has asked China to urge Iran to rein in Houthi rebels. Will Beijing oblige, and will Iran even listen to any of that? What's the way forward? Doesn't seem very clear. And for more on this, we're now being joined by Dr. Hassan Al-Hassan, who's a research fellow for Middle East policy at the IISS. He's decade of experience as a scholar and a practitioner of foreign policy. He was also served on His Royal Highness the Crown Prince of Bahrain staff as a senior analyst on foreign policy and national security. Dr. Al-Hassan, thank you so much for being with us. Just wanted to get your sense of what's actually playing itself out, especially in Yemen and especially with the Houthis.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. It's good to be with you. Well, in a sense, we've seen a round of escalation and counter-escalation. And so the Houthis initially started out by linking their interdiction and disruption of maritime traffic in the Red Sea as an effort meant to dissuade Israel from continuing its destructive and bloody military campaign in Gaza. The US has responded by creating Operation Prosperity Guardian, leading it essentially creating a coalition of nations with almost no regional representation whatsoever beyond Bahrain. And that has spiraled to multiple direct confrontations where the Houthis have attempted to target certain US naval vessels, and the US and British forces have responded with multiple rounds of strikes. However, it's, I think, clear that it will be very difficult simply with limited airstrikes to totally degrade the Houthis' capabilities to continue disrupting maritime traffic. The Houthis have endured multiple years of being bombed from the air during the war with the Saudi-led coalition. And so they're quite used to concealing their capabilities. Much of their military capabilities are compact and agile, can be concealed. And so it's, in a sense, the US is going to be caught in a cat and mouse chase where it will need very dynamic intelligence that is able to essentially preempt Houthi attacks on short notice. So it's not an easy game, and the Houthis, I think, will not be deterred very easily.
So if airstrikes you think are not going to do it, then what are the alternatives? Either you let the Houthis be, or if at some point some sort of ground operations or a ground offensive in Yemen is going to be called for, and that has its own repercussions, what will be the stance you think of the Gulf states this time around? What will be the reactions of Saudi Arabia? How does it tie up with Iran?
Well, I think, unfortunately, the United States has viewed this purely through a military lens, and I think that's very short-sighted and ineffective. What the Houthis are, in fact, and by extension, Iran are doing, is exploiting what they see as a strategic opportunity afforded to them by Israel's very destructive and bloody military campaign in Gaza to achieve political and ideological gains. And I think that's the logic that the US has not been able to deal with very effectively. The point being here, the bottom line, and this explains also why there has been no regional support, except for Bahrain, for those British and American strikes on the Houthis, even though there is little sympathy for the Houthis among the Arab states. Ultimately, the political route, I think, is viewed in the region as being the most effective and de-escalatory option, in the sense that if the US wants to achieve a region-wide de-escalation, so not just the Red Sea, but including in Lebanon and Syria and Iraq, where Iran-partnered militias are conducting attacks on US military interests there, then the best way to do that is by weighing on Israel and the Israeli government and pushing them towards a ceasefire. That would knock the political and ideological wind out of much of what the Houthis are doing in the Red Sea and what Iran's other partnered militias are doing.
Ceasefire in Gaza is the one point that you're making, and obviously a lot of effort is there. Assuming that doesn't work, is there something else that can be done? Some other way of talking to the Houthis or to the Iranians, for that matter, or is that unlikely now?
Well, that seems unlikely at the moment, because, as I said, this is an inflection point in the region. We've seen Iran make strategic gains by essentially changing the rules of engagement. They've managed, through their partnership with the Houthis, to open up a new front against the US and against Israel, and that is the Red Sea, in a way that has repercussions potentially for regional, but also for the global economy. And so this is a strategic gain for Iran that it has been able to claim for itself without really paying much of a price directly. And so I don't see why, short of a real change in the way Israel is currently prosecuting its objectives in Gaza, I don't see why Iran and how Iran will be made to change its calculus without, of course, a massive US military investment, which I don't think there is much political will in the US to do, not least during an election year.
All right, Dr. Al-Hassan, that sounds rather gloomy, but probably realistic. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.